Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Tastemakers podcast. I'm your host, Taran Armstrong, and we are here, of course, today to talk through all the latest in the world of TV and film. There's a lot to talk about, and with me to talk about it all, Grace Leeder and Grace.
I'm doing well, Taran. I feel like I ate a lot of food this week, and I don't think any of it was particularly good. So I ate a lot of junk, I think, this week, which we could talk about. But
Oh
yeah,
boy. Well,
yeah.
lots to talk about with junk. We've got some news to talk about, some things announced. We've got some new shows to talk through. Dying for Sex, Paul Devil Might Cry, The Bondsman, Minecraft released this week, so we'll talk about all of those. Catch up on some of the shows currently airing. White Lotus aired its finale this week. We're going to be talking a lot about that, I'm sure. And then talking about what's coming up in the coming week. And oh boy, we got some big stuff coming up this week. So lots to talk about here on the podcast. I think we should probably start with White Lotus.
Yeah, I think you and I talked about before. We'll probably start with White Lotus. Maybe we can talk generally about what happened, and then at the end, I think we could maybe time dependent cut off a little bit of a spoiler section for folks to really dive into what happened specifically. But we can keep it spoiler free up front.
Yes, spoiler free White Lotus. General thoughts, talks about some of the reaction. I would say I've seen mostly positive, but some more lukewarm. Feedback on the ending in particular. I would say mostly positive on the season, more mixed on the finale itself. And I am definitely personally in the lukewarm camp. I thought it was a kind of a disappointing finale.
Yeah, I think I probably lead there as well. There's this way in which I think almost everything that I don't think anything that happened was particularly surprising, which is a little bit of where it's a downer. And there were certainly some like red herrings that got thrown in the hopes that what actually happened would be exciting. And ultimately, I found it not to be that exciting. I guess I do think that when we look back at the White Lotus, I think seasons 1 and seasons 2, while there are these moments, and I actually think in particular the death in season 1 was interesting. The death in season 2, I thought, is like an incredible scene and memorable for the rest of my life. And this one probably doesn't live up to that. And it's probably closer to the season 1 ending. But even then, I find it probably a little less satisfying as well. Yeah, there was a way in which I felt like it was like, oh, we thought it was going to be this thing, and then it's been long enough that we're like, oh, probably not going to be that thing, and then they loop around and it actually is the first thing we thought, which, it's interesting. That's kind of like how I felt about Yellow Jackets season, but I think that they pulled it off, and I kind of think the White Lotus was less successful at pulling it off. But where's your stance on this all, Taran?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I was feeling a little bit bored by the season around the middle section. It started to ramp up again, and I got excited about like, oh, who's gonna die? That's the classic White Lotus situation. And then by the end, the death stuff was actually, in my opinion, by far the least interesting part. And there were, I think, two of the storylines I thought ended really well and interestingly, and then the other 2 to 3 I thought were kind of lame endings. So we'll get into more detail about which ones were which, I would say, in the spoiler section. But overall, I just feel like I just feel a little bit let down, knowing how good it can be and how good the parts of it that I liked were. I feel like there were some big blunders that just felt really unnecessary.
Yeah, I do think I think there's been a misconception the way people have been talking about the show, in the sense that people have been saying it was slow. I do not think it was slow. Actually, if you think about each individual episodes, there's actually a fair bit that happens in almost every storyline. What my argument is the pacing was off. And I do think that there's a way in which I might argue that Mike's White's instinct, whether this is true or not, which is to do 6 episodes and every episode be a day, would have worked much better for this season of the show. I feel like if we got the things that we got at the end of the season in like episode 6, I feel like this feels a little more satisfying. Instead, we're sort of like plodding through things to get to these moments that we get to. And ultimately, I do feel like they all sort of, I actually think kind of, I don't know if there's I'll have to really think about this, whether I think this is true or not, but that any of the storylines I feel like ended like amazingly. I kind of feel like
I
they,
think only one of the storylines was properly paced.
yeah.
Um, the other one I liked was just a fun way to end that storyline, and then the other ones were just a bit of a mess in terms of pacing.
And there's this other thing too where this whole season we're sort of like leading up this, like there's the format of the show, which is every episode is a day. And then we really broke that this season because it's 8 episodes and over the course of 6 days. But then we get to the last episode and it's kind of like we spend a bunch of time being like, all right, now we're all going to go to bed, and then it's the morning, it's like, all right, it's our last day, and then we basically cut to like a thing very late. I don't know, it just felt like I think for me the pacing was off, not that there was nothing happening. I think that there was actually quite a bit happening throughout the show, but yeah. There's
Yeah.
also this thing, Taran. Sorry, is that well, let me defer to you first before I
Well, I was
sort of segue
about to
us.
segue into what you I think you were going to talk about, which is that there's drama on set, but also drama offset with the White Lotus. Lots of news coming out about the White Lotus this week.
Yeah, so there's about 3 different stories that basically dropped in the past week that all signs point to literally the quote from Jason Isaacs in a interview he did is that there's basically as much drama. Here it is. They say in the show what happens in Thailand stays in Thailand, but there's an off-screen White Lotus as well with fewer deaths but just as much drama. And I think that basically sums up all 3 storylines, like all 3 stories that came out this past week surrounding some White Lotus drama. The first one being that the composer has come out and said, first of all, Mike White wouldn't put my woo-loo-loos in the song, and we had creative disagreements, and I'm not coming back for season 4. The second one being sort of this Jason Isaacs thing that apparently the cast and the filming of White Lotus can become very cliquey, and he specifically says relationships were made, but relationships were also lost. And then finally, Mike White's appearance on Andrew Sullivan's podcast. Andrew Sullivan, known for having quite right-leaning political views, and some of the conversation, although I do not think that Mike White said anything in particular that I fundamentally think I disagree with. It's the platform in which he goes to talk about this, and I think some of the language that's being used is dog whistling. So I feel like not a great week for the things surrounding the show of the White Lotus, Taryn.
Well, and then you also had there was this article about like how all the actors get paid the same on the White Lotus,
Yeah.
and then there was speculation because of that, because Woody Harrelson was supposed to be on the season, that he tried to negotiate a higher salary, and for that reason he ended up not doing the show. So he had to come out and be like, "No, the reason I didn't do the show is because I had a vacation planned that I had to do instead, but because they
Yeah.
changed the dates, and so Sam Rockwell had to come in and take his place, and so like there was drama there too." Um, so yeah, just like I mean, listen, I think this speaks to the current situation with the White Lotus, which is that the finale, whether you liked it or not, was the highest rated episode of the season in terms of viewership. 6.2 million viewers is what I'm seeing, which is the highest the show has ever seen by 30%. So the show has continued to grow. It was already a very popular show. Does well in the awards season, and it is really, really starting to like continue that growth, enter into more mainstream conversation. I think it's here to stay for now, at least.
Yeah, well, so I think there's a couple of things here, which is one, the more it becomes popular, the more people want to write about it, and so this interview that happened with the composer, which I want to pull the name of him up, it probably is more likely to happen because the show is so popular than it would have if it didn't. So that's at the and then the other one is like Jason Isaacs talked with Vulture about this, but the Hollywood Reporter released on April 2nd this like uncensored oral history of the filming, and then the podcast that Mike White was on was there. And then the other piece of this is that Mike White is sort of he's the only writer on the show, and he is the creator of the show and the showrunner. He, I believe, directs the episodes. So you have a lot of the sort of weight of the show being positioned onto one person, I think, in a way that is not unusual for television. Like, the amount of times people are complaining about Game of Thrones and specifically putting it on Benioff and Weiss is probably fair, but there is sort of that natural inclination for this, for the, more eyes, more scrutiny to be on this one individual, especially when it sounds like he, like, so the rumor about him is that he will not do a writer's room. Like, he goes into a room, writes what he writes, and comes out. Natasha Rothwell has talked about that she was able to work with him on specifically Belinda's writing because she wanted to have a say in that, considering she's a Black woman and Mike White is not. And I think you can sort of feel my like tensions with the show sometimes were in the way in which, like, I worried about some of the way gender identity was being positioned, and I think some of that, I think, knowing that he just writes it on himself, I'm then entrusting sort of that he can, represent that fairly. And it, like, I think online people are unsure if he can. So yeah, all very interesting.
Well, I guess more to talk about with the White Lotus at the end of the podcast if you want to hear about our more detailed spoilery thoughts. In the meantime, I do have a couple of quicker news items. I want to talk about Dexter Original Sin has been renewed officially for season 2.
Yeah.
We had a funny journey with this one where I kind of poo-pooed the premiere pretty harshly, but then honestly came around to liking the first season. I'm kind of happy that we're getting a second season. So exciting stuff.
Yeah, that's coming alongside Dexter Resurrections, which is cast Uma Thurman, Neil Patrick Harris, and Peter Dinklage in that show. So
yeah, they're going to be running the sequel series and the prequel series like alternately.
Yeah, it's very funny.
There was also some news about Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse is officially getting its release date in June of 2027, which is wild.
Do you remember when they were like, this will come out next, like the ending of the, like, it had aired, I can't remember when it was, and they were like, don't worry, part 2 is coming next February or whatever. And I think it was last February that was supposed to come out, and it's been pushed that far. I mean, honestly, probably just the right choice because animation takes a long time to do.
Well, but here's the thing. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse comes out in 2023. It's part 1 of a 2-part movie. And yes, they very, very heavily overpromised by saying we'll be ready in like 6 months. And it's going to be instead like 4 years. But also just like, maybe don't do a part 1 movie. I personally went and saw this movie. I did not know that it was a part 1. The movie ended, and I was pretty disappointed.
I've never heard more people mad in a movie theater for something that they liked, where they were like mad because it was over and there wasn't any more of it. It was.
I personally felt like it was a weaker film than the first one in the first place, and part of that, I'm sure, was that it didn't finish. But like. I was like, okay, I guess if I've watched the rest of this soon, but let me tell you, I already don't remember most of what happened in that movie. And I guess I'll have to rewatch. I don't know. I'm just like not actually that excited about this movie coming out in 2027. And that's a wild shame because I really loved the first one. But that's just me.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I remember I liked it, but I don't really remember much about the movie. So, yeah.
We talked about MobLand last week, the Tom Hardy, Pierce Brosnan,
Helen Mirren,
sort of, Taylor Sheridan-esque show that's not actually Taylor Sheridan, it's Ronan Bennett. And it seems as though I think that I feel like we kind of got this right. Like, it wasn't really for me, at least. But I was like, I think this will work for you if this is your kind of thing. And apparently, it is exactly people's kinds of thing because it has done very well for Paramount Plus. It is a very, very highly watched premiere.
I think you're really right to put it in sort of the Taylor Sheridan world of it, because I do think this is one that most people who I think like critic score, unless I'm I'm wrong. Maybe I'll pull up my Rotten Tomatoes score for this, but I feel like most of the reviews I saw were like, yeah, it's okay. But then I think people were like, oh, I like it. This is good. There's going to be another thing we'll talk about that I actually feel like has that sort of feeling, a movie we'll talk about later.
Mhm.
Actually, that's interesting. The critic score is higher than the popcorn score on Rotten Tomatoes, 77% critic score and 68 popcorn meter. So that's,
Hmm.
I thought it would have been the reverse, but that's interesting. Yeah.
I mean, it's well made, so I could see maybe critics being like, "Yeah, it's good."
I think a thing
You
we
know?
didn't talk about last week was that Guy Ritchie did not credit the show, but he came on and directed the first 2 episodes.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it's sort of it, if you're thinking about what type of show it is, it's definitely that sort of British gangster, gruesome, grungy type feel. Yeah.
yeah. One more quick piece of news. I just saw this today. Happy Death Day 3
Mm,
has finally been. There's some movement on it. This is a fun little series of movies that I think many horror fans are fond of.
okay, fun. I don't actually think I've watched any Happy Death Days. I'll have to
You
check
should
them
check
out.
it out.
Yeah. Um, Speaking of movies, Cinemacon happened.
Mhm.
Cinemacon, the event where movie theater like owners, managers, etc., go to, along with a lot of press, go and the studios deliver basically their slate of everything that they want to show. That can be anything that's coming out this year in the next few months, all the way till stuff that's being released next year. Like apparently one of the big presentations was about Project Hail Mary. Ryan Gosling is this movie. This is the same. This is Andy Weir, I believe, is the author who wrote The Martian. This movie looks apparently quite good. It's Ryan Gosling in a sort of space adventure. I believe it's being directed by Lord and Miller. That movie, although they apparently showed like a full scene, it's not coming out until basically a year from now. So there's kind of showing this full slate of everything they have. One of the big pieces of conversation that happened out of comic or CinemaCon, Taran, is the talk of windows and how long should a movie be kept in theaters. And the big discussion about this is basically COVID opened the door for studios to lessen that window. And they are arguing that and the window, just to clarify for listeners, does not mean that it goes to a streaming service. And this is also, I think, part of the debate that is being had, because they're arguing that actually it's going from theaters to premium video on demand. And that's where when you go and look for something to rent or buy, normally it's only available to rent at this point, and it costs you like $25 or something along
Who does
there.
that nowadays?
Well, this is what they're saying, is that actually Wicked made an extra $100 million on premium VOD. And the thing that studios like about PVOD versus streaming and versus theatrical going is they don't have to split as much of that revenue with the movie theater if it's premium video on demand at home. So they say that's premium VOD, they say, is not cutting into this idea for people that they won't go to the theater.
Mm.
And so this is sort of the debate that's happening. And there are a few studios, or not studios, movie theaters are trying to get a guaranteed 45-day a window. That's sort of what they want, knowing that if a movie is very successful, it might be longer. It seems like some studios are on board and some are not. And the big debate about this is whether or not moving to premium video on demand and eventually streaming sooner trains audiences not to go to movie theaters and instead wait to watch things at home. And I think kind of studios are saying that doesn't really bear out, even though the box office is down year over year, especially it's had a tough time rebounding after COVID. But I'm wondering, like, to me, premium like windows don't really matter to me in the sense that if I'm going to see something that I want to see in the movie theater, I'm going to see it in the movie theater. And maybe there's the world. I think I'm too tuned in to know, like, oh, I can't believe I missed that one. Like I'm not missing a Nora or something that's not getting this full release. But I'm wondering about other people who don't make movie going more of their like habit. If do you feel like do you wait for stuff, Karen, or are you like, you know, yeah, I'm just want yeah, the
I
Windows,
mean,
Karen.
for yeah, my experience is like right now, I like it was my birthday this past week, And so I'm busy, and I was like, what am I doing for my birthday? I don't know. Is there a movie playing? Because it would be great to go to a movie. There wasn't really a movie playing that I was interested in going to see.
Yeah.
Nothing that like stood out that I was like, yeah, that's going to be a great experience. And so I was like, I'm kind of in the mood to go see a movie, but there's nothing here that I want to go out and see a movie for. There's nothing that I would pay for
Yeah.
with premium video on demand.
Yeah.
Nothing that I'd go to the movie theater for, but probably a few things that I'd watch on streaming. For instance, Minecraft, I will watch when it's on streaming. But there's no chance I'm going to the theater to see it personally.
Yeah.
But I would want to see it because, as we'll talk about, it's doing very well, and you want to see it. You want to see it if everyone's seeing it. But there's another movie coming out that we're going to talk about called Warfare that I am going to probably go see this weekend because that's interesting to me. Well, as long as it's not tanked, and as long as people don't hate it.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of like my experience of it. But again, like I just feel like if it's not something that is really good that I know I'm going to have a good time going and seeing, then I'm probably not going to go see it, even if I plan to watch it later, because I know it's going to come to streaming soon. I'm personally never paying to watch something just the one thing, because there's way too many other things to watch. And even sometimes there are good things in theaters, but I'm just not in a place. I'm not in a place to go see it in a theater because I don't have time. And again, I'm just not going to pay for it to watch it at home. I'm just going to wait for it to be free on my streaming services that I already pay for.
Yeah, and see, I think the piece of it is, my argument would be make more movies, because if you make more movies, there's more likely that something will hit that maybe you feel like that I'm talking about you specifically, Taran, might feel more inclined to be like, oh, that would be interesting to go watch in the movies, as opposed to, like, it's not like there aren't a bunch of movies out right now, but I've kind of had the same feeling of like, am I gonna get, I'm a person who often, here's how unique of a situation I am in. Whereas I'm kind of this person who's like, I should probably go see 2 movies I'm going to see at the theater. So now I'm kind of looking for 2 movies that I think are worth watching. And often I'm looking at like a movie theater and I don't think that they have sort of enough of that offering. I often found at a theater there might be one and then not something else that I was willing to like, add on top of that. So I think if studios made more movies, and this was the pitch from the director of Nickel Boys, I believe, or was it last year with American Fiction? It was last year. The writer who won, writer director Cord Jefferson, who was talking about make more $10 million movies instead of 100 million, make $10 million movies instead of $100 million movies, which I tend to agree with, because then you would have this sort of like flourishing of things that you could go see, that if you were tempted to go to the movies, at least something's going to like might pique your interest and you'd go see. But I ultimately think maybe this thing is overblown in the sense of like, movie theaters aren't going away. Probably they're just kind of probably going to become more niche. I don't know. I think people are like trying to hold on to something that's probably not coming back to the way it used to be. So
Yeah, I think that I think that's fair. I think it's been heading in that direction. I remember having this was like the big conversation piece back when Avatar was first released, and it was like, and the big like 3D craze in theaters was like, you need something to bring people out to theaters. At the time, I think people really thought it was these various gimmicks or like formats, but I think the reality is that it tends to just be cultural moments. Like, what is something that touches everyone? I have no like artistic desire to go see Minecraft, but because everyone's watching it, I'll see Minecraft. I'm not going to go see Minecraft, but a lot of people are, kids in particular, I imagine. And so, this idea of, movies making a ton of money, if they're not things like that, at least when you're spending hundreds of $1 millions on the movie's budget, it does seem to be like a little bit waning. And so what does that mean for theaters, and what does that mean for all of this? I don't have the answers, but
what
it's
about
interesting.
what about television shows? Would you ever, what if they were like, what if the theater closest to you was like, hey, we're playing the Pitt finale on Thursday in
100%.
theaters? Yeah.
Yeah, I'd go.
Yeah, TIFF was doing this thing where they played the Curse each week on Sundays. They played the first episodes of Heartstopper. There was like an Oscars nomination watch where you could go watch in the movie theater. I thought that was cool. I feel like movie theaters should be. I want, yeah, because so many like miniseries stuff have become basic. That's what, like, things that are miniseries now are often like 15, 20 years ago, 30 years ago would have just been a movie, and now they're miniseries on TV. So anyway, not that
I
like
mean,
it
I
is a
I think
miniseries,
that's
but
part of it too, though. It's like, I think TV shows can feel like cultural moments, and so the problem is that there's so
one
many
time. Yeah,
opportunities in TV shows, and they also are also airing
I know.
at times. Like, can most people go to the movies like on a Thursday night? Um,
True.
like that gets tricky, but yeah,
You know
interesting.
what's we're on the eve of if you we're on RHAP here. If you've never been to a live show, watching Survivor with a bunch of Survivor fans in a theater is one of the coolest things you will ever do in your life. So I highly recommend people do that at least once in life. I think everyone's going to Boston this week. So yeah.
Yeah. All right. Anything else news wise?
No, I don't think so. We can hop into television and movies that we've
All
watched.
right, let's check in on. I don't think there's anything deep to talk about with the new shows this week, so we'll kind of quickly run through them. But some new shows to talk about. One of which, "Dying for Sex," came out on Hulu and produced by FX. I don't really understand the logistics of like FX anymore, but did you check out "Dying for Sex," Grace?
I did. I watched one episode. I believe the whole season is out, but
It is.
I just watched the first one, and I have to say there are moments that I really like in it. I do think it's trying very hard to be a comedy, and it's funny because one of the first things I felt when I turned it on was like, "Ooh, 27 minutes." I was like, kind of delighted. I thought this was going to be an hour-long drama. I will say I thought tonally, it wasn't. There was something that was missing for me in the way that you would often have. Um, this I thought the ideas were really interesting and some of the tonal stuff of the show was good, and then it would like kind of get undermined with like a joke. And I think that actually Jenny Slate is probably the person in the show. I actually really like Michelle. I actually quite like all three people, but I kind of think there's Michelle Williams and Jay Duplass. We've talked a lot about Mark Duplass on the show, but this is Jay Duplass, his brother. And then there's also Jenny Slate. And I like the three of them a fair bit, and I
Rob
kind of
Delaney
think,
also shows up a few
oh, okay, I
episodes.
haven't seen him yet. So, but I kind of think that they're all in different shows, basically. And so I thought this was fine, and I'm not writing it off, but I just thought there was something about it not working for me. It's almost like it's the right thing I want it to focus on with the wrong execution of it. I think. I don't know. What'd you make of this?
Yeah, so this is the show where a woman played by Michelle Williams here, is diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. She's gonna die basically, and decides to sort of like leave her husband and explore her sexuality, based on, I think, a true story, inspired by a true story, as it says in the poster. Um,
Yeah.
and I think you have it right. Some of what I've seen about the response to this was like, yeah, I couldn't watch it. I was too depressed because I've had like a personal experience with cancer, and like so. I think I will I think lightly spoil one small storyline. I'm 3 or 4 episodes in. Basically, a small little thing where she goes to a support group for like stage 1 cancer or something,
Okay.
people, and they are full of hope and like, we're gonna beat this. And she infiltrates this group because she wants to feel that, even though she has stage 4 and she's going to die. And then eventually she admits that she has stage 4, and she is kicked out of the group. Small, tiny little side plot in this show, but I think she's kicked out of the group because she's too depressing to the other members of the group, because they want to have hope, and she does not represent hope. And so it's kind of which is kind of like the point here, right? Like, one of the reasons why she's having trouble with her husband is because she depresses him,
Yeah.
because she's going to die. And how do you deal with that as a person? And so doing that plus being a comedy is definitely a weird line to walk. And I would say personally, I'm actually kind of enjoying it. It's not like premium TV or anything, but I was just like having it on was kind of fun. There are some good jokes here or there. And it is, I think I probably like am a little bit sick in the head, in that like I enjoy when things have tonal shifts a lot. Um, but yeah, it was interesting stuff. I did I thought I found a thread on Reddit talking about the show, and I thought it was very interesting because there was like a few comments, as you would often I think find on Reddit, that were something along the lines of like, why would I watch this show? Why would I care about why would I ever root for a protagonist who leaves her husband so she can explore her sexuality when she's dying? Like, what a B word, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
like I couldn't root for somebody like that. And then there was a great comment under one of those posts when somebody said, yeah, I agree. I could never root for, like, for instance, a man who abandoned his wife to go deal meth when he was
Right.
diagnosed with
Right.
cancer.
Right. Yeah, I think for me, I think like I like the idea of the storyline. I don't like how it's sort of portrayed, and it's try not to do this too much where it's like, well, it's not this show over here. I think I actually probably do this all the time, but apple cider vinegar, I feel like kind of nailed this dynamic of
Mm.
the boyfriend who's being overprotective and on this track of like, I'm gonna have you for as long as I want, even though that's going to severely limit. So like the whole premise of episode 1 is that she hasn't like left him, but she runs out of this like therapist appointment, and she buys this Diet Coke, and she wants to do all this stuff, and he's like, no, we're only gonna, you have to eat healthy, you have to whatever. And she's like, bro, I'm gonna die, like who can, like, let me just have fun, basically, is like a little bit of the premise. I like the idea of it. I don't think it like is working for me on the show, but I've only watched one episode, and I don't think it was bad enough to not watch more. I actually think Jenny Slate is pretty funny. Actually, like all of them. Again, all three of the main characters, I actually kind of like them. I just don't think anything's driving it. Apple Cider Vinegar, I think, did a storyline like that so perfectly
Mm.
that I had a little bit of a tough time with like that scene in Dying for
I
Sex.
think
But
the
yeah,
7.2 on IMDb right here, I think, is pretty perfect for it if you like are looking at sort of like how IMDb tends to rate shows. Like, it's got some, it's watchable. But it's not gonna like necessarily blow your socks off, at least from what I've seen
right.
so far. All right, let's quickly check in with Pulse. Grace, did you watch Pulse at all?
I watched the first episode of Pulse.
Me too. It
Uh,
was exactly what I expected.
yeah, I have to say, I don't even know if I finished the episode. I was having a little bit of a tough time with it. Mostly,
I
actually, I just
struggled to finish the episode. It was out of obligation that I finished the episode.
So here's the thing: the very first. So this is a medical drama. Not to compare, but tough to be out while the Pit is on
Bad
the verge
timing.
of its finale of its amazing season 1. Actually, we didn't talk about. We'll talk about maybe Pit news later. They've
Mhm,
announced what they're going to do for season 2, what day it's going to be, which we can
mhm.
talk about later. But the first scene, so I remember talking about the first episode of The Pit and being like, wow, what a great setup, where you basically get introduced to Dr. Robbie, and he walks through the ER, and you're meeting all of the people who you basically learn what is their relationship to Dr. Robbie, and it basically helps define every character, most importantly our main protagonist, but you get these really great sort of offshoots from him, and I thought it was a very great way to center it. This show starts with one of the stories of a thing that happens, which is whatever. I don't care. I'm going to spoil it. There's basically a hurricane on the way, and
It's the first scene of the show. Yeah.
a bus flies off a bridge into the water. It has a bunch of high school students, basically.
Student athletes, and it's
A-
all like it's full CGI too. It's like not
And,
that great.
and I just think the thing that the Pit does so well is it first and foremost has interesting characters to follow and tells interesting stories. And the thing that's is like, okay, and then somebody comes in and this thing is happening to them, but it's really, we're really grounded with our team to be like, oh, this is what we're seeing from their perspective in terms of them helping, a little girl whose sister has like, drowned in the pool, or like this guy broke his leg, or this is a kid who has measles and the parents in back, but it's all like so character driven. And this was like cool action scene of the bus flying over the bridge, and like that's the show that we're doing. And it's like that's not actually what I'm interested in the medical drama show, so I think immediately I was like, oh, you're not as good as the Pitt, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, if you really want to extra love the Pit, you can watch 10 minutes of this show and then be like, oh yeah, that Pit is really
That's
that
right.
good, huh?
That's right.
I checked out Devil May Cry, the animated show. I believe this is based on the video game of the same name. But I'm not sure the origins of that story. I watched one episode of this. It was basically exactly what I expected, in that it just feels like every other cool animated show on Netflix that just isn't my personal thing, but a lot of people seem to like it themselves. For me, it's just like, the show opened on two back-to-back separate action scenes that were very violent. And I have nothing against violence in shows. In fact, I tend to enjoy it. But I just don't care. I just personally, it's just like, I have no stakes in any of this. So, wasn't really my thing, but I think if you are like wondering if it's like a flop for people who do like this kind of thing, I don't think it is. I think people seem to like it.
It's very funny that we're looking at the IMDb here, and the poster is so serious. And then the first image on the still image on the trailer is he's eating a cherry sundae.
I mean,
Um,
that's pretty classic.
okay. The
Devil
Devil
May
May Cry. I don't know. I didn't watch this.
Yeah.
uh,
I checked out the Bondsman as well on
yep.
Amazon Prime. This is the Kevin Bacon show, where he. I can give you a little more detail because I watched the first two episodes. He is a bondsman, whatever that means. He tracks down criminals who are escaping bond or whatever, and gets killed, and resurrected. He goes to, I guess the details of which are, to be determined in the first couple episodes, where you sort of learn some details that I won't spoil. But basically, he's back alive after being killed, and now has a new purpose in life, which is to track down demons, and basically do his job from before, but now for demons, is sort of like the basic premise of the show. It's pretty fun. I would say I really enjoyed the first episode. I thought the second episode slowed down considerably because we're getting into sort of monster of the week territory. And I'm worried that that's the entire show. But it was fine. It was a decent time.
Yeah, I watched the first episode of this. I think that the first episode is super setup-y in a way that didn't quite work for me, but is fine. I'm gonna give it like a gigantic pass because it's like it. You kind of. I think there's probably a better way they could have done the setup, but I get what they were doing, and kind of knowing the premise kind of ruins episode one. Honestly, I think to a degree. And there's no way for us not to ruin it for you. Like if you're listening to this, you now will basically know the premise, and I don't think there's a way that I think episode one probably works significantly better if you have no idea what's happening in the show, and as soon as you do, it's hard not to know and see what they're doing in a way that and then they're trying to leave some mystery, but I don't think that's really working for me in the way they did it. It does feel, I kept comparing it to like Supernatural, Smallville, even like there's definitely some of this like CW energy that's like not
Mhm.
quite, it's more gory than that. The thing that happens in episode one right off the bat that you're like, oh, that's pretty gnarly. I liked it more than I thought. The first time I heard about the show, I laughed real hard because I thought it was very silly. And I have to say that I'm, eating my shorts a little bit. I think it's a
I
little better than I thought it would be.
Last week I said that it gave me Evil Dead vibes,
Yes.
just based on like the poster and stuff. I wouldn't say it's quite that. It's not that fun or funny, but it is trying to be fun and funny. But it's I don't think quite like as goofy, I would say, as something like Evil Dead. But it's fine. It's, again, I would say similar to Dying for Sex in that like it's watchable. It's probably not going to blow your socks off.
I kind of like the idea that it's Monster of the Week, Taran, but I haven't actually watched the Monster of the Week stuff to know if that's actually true or not. But that's where I say, like, remember the first season of Smallville, where it'd just be like, yeah, it was like Monster of the Week stuff. Clark Kent.
Well, I mean, that brings us back to our Buffy discussion, I think, which is like, can something like that work in today's environment? And personally, I just feel like I think I'm personally kind of done with Monster of the Week. The closest Monster of the Week came to working for me was there were like a couple episodes of The Witcher, like season 1 probably, that I was like, oh, it's really trying to do more than just defeat a monster. It's really like making a whole grand state. This feels like its own contained short story, and that's because it was its own contained short story that it was adapting.
Well, what do we call this? Because it's Monster of the Week, but it released all in one day, so it's Monster of the Episode, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who knows? And then of course, you've got the Minecraft movie, a Minecraft movie, which has been massively successful in the box office this weekend. Massive hit, despite middling reviews from both critics and audiences. People are seeing it. It beat Mario.
Yeah. So I went and saw this movie, and I said this before that I have a little bit of an affinity for Minecraft. I actually disagree. I think that critically this movie is bad, but actually, like popcorn meter wise, like fan approval wise, it's actually doing pretty well. IMDb, I think, is a little bit of a different. I think there's there's IMDb scores and there's Rotten Tomato scores, and I think that they tell us two different things. So like 6.1 on IMDb, I think sort of matches with the idea that this has a 48% critic score and an 87% audience score. That to me, and that tracks, I think, with basically you're kind of like meeting in the middle in the IMDb score, but this explains how it did so well at the box office. Here's the thing. I'm a little embarrassed to say that I actually didn't mind the Minecraft movie at all. It's entirely stupid and silly. I think this is I mean, I just really like Jack Black. And then I think like Jason Momoa is this is what Jason Momoa should probably just be doing all of the time instead of whatever else he's tried. This to me was like pretty good use of him. They're both just ginormous stupid dorks. There's a really funny Jennifer Coolidge thing that through this movie. I do think so. Here's the thing I've heard about this movie, Taran, which is that like people are like, hey, don't be so mad about how bad it is. It's a kid's movie. And then there's this counter argument of like, hey, we can make actually good movies for kids. So don't go on saying like, don't disparage something as being a kid's movie when it's actually a bad movie, when we've actually made good kids movies. I do think this is not like prestige movie going, but I think that this is the type of movie that's been around for years. And I think even people being like, oh, it's a bad movie, it's not a kid's movie, are like, yeah, there are good kids movies that sort of like like Toy Story is a really great example that like I think it's a kids movie, but you can watch as an adult and appreciate it. That to me is so different than this. I mean, and I don't know.
Honestly, I don't even really look at this as like kids movie, adult movie. I look at this as like this is a property movie. Right. Like I think about the Studio episode 1 where they're like, let's make a Kool-Aid movie.
Yes.
That's what this is to me. In the same way that like Mario was or Barbie was. And there's different ways to do it. And I think Barbie is sort of like the most artistic take on a property movie that we've seen so far. But like
Barbie is what in the Seth Rogen in the Studio wishes he's making. I think they even maybe say that in the show.
Yeah. And I think that what we are continuing to learn is that these movies based on massive properties are massively successful, and all that you need to do is make them passable movies. They need to just be good, just pretty good. If they're pretty good and they're based on a massively popular thing, it will do really well. And that seems to be what Minecraft is. And what I will say is, connecting it to the kids thing, is that like most massively popular properties are kids related in some way, because children often drive that sort of thing.
Children don't drive that much. You have to be 16. Okay, because I've never felt older in my life than feeling like I understood. I feel like I'm on there's this really, I never felt older in my life when during this movie there were multiple points that because they were in the trailer, they got memed. And so there's particularly a moment where Jack Black says, "I am Steve." And it became a pretty big meme. I didn't know it was a meme. I didn't know it was a meme. I didn't know it. And then it happens in the movie, and almost the entire movie said the line along with Jack Black. And I was like, what is going on? It was like like the Gentle Minions meme. Like I felt like it
Mm-hmm.
was like I was like, oh, there's a meme that is like I've never seen and encountered, and now it's here, and I'm seeing it. It was like that, and the Taylor Swift movie when it was like they were like you can dance in the aisles, and everybody got up and was like turning on their phones, and I was like, oh no, I'm old. Please.
Grace, you may
But
have convinced me to go see the Minecraft movie
it,
in theaters.
if if you go with like a big audience, I think that you'll have this thing of like there's also this thing of McDonald's has a Minecraft meal that's like a Happy Meal, and people are going to buy these like they really have done something with this media property. And I think I still gave it 2 out of 5. I just don't think it's like, is it the worst movie ever? I don't think it's the worst movie I've ever seen. So
Mhm.
it is what it is. It's a
It
Minecraft movie.
is. All right. Any other new things this week, Grace?
I I don't think so. I think that's I think that's what I watched.
All right, let's catch up on some stuff then. Let's talk about the pit a little bit. Probably not too
Let
much to talk about, but another, as per usual, great episode. We have one episode left in the season. We are going to be talking about the season as a whole, full spoilers. After the season ends, we'll have a separate podcast just for that if you are interested in some pit coverage. But yeah, I mean, it just continues to hit. And as you mentioned before, we got some more news about season 2, which should be starting in January of next year, way before Spider-Man's coming out.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So they announced it's going to be July 4th, which I didn't really realize this, but as soon as you do, you're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. There's apparently a nightmarish day to be working in the emergency room of a hospital because people are outside all day. People are blowing things up, specifically fireworks, but mishappening, grilling. People are drinking a lot. It is apparently an absolute nightmare of a day to work in the emergency room. I think the other one that people talk about is there's often a phenomenon. I thought this was really interesting. There's Alex B, who was talking about the fact that there's a lot of things when Thanksgiving and Christmas are days where grandparents bring a lot of children because they haven't seen them in a while and they think something's wrong. And I was like, oh, that's super fascinating. And it's like, no, you don't look, you don't hang out with your grandchildren enough to know something's not wrong. But yeah, apparently July 4th is an awful day to work in a hospital, and that's the setting. So that's pretty fun, I think. Yeah.
I did check out, you mentioned this either last week or the week before, Last One Laughing.
Yes.
I did check this out, Last One Laughing UK, and let me tell you, it was difficult to find
Oh, really?
because there are
Oh,
a
there's a million. Yeah.
billion
Yeah.
versions of this around the world.
Yeah.
And this image of Bob Mortimer was like the logo in Amazon Prime Video,
Yeah.
and it's like I can barely recognize this face of his.
He's
Like
making a
when
silly. He's one of the people making one of the sillier faces on the poster.
yeah, and it's just his face. I thought I thought he was like some Romanian presenter of like the Romanian version or something.
Amazing.
And so I had trouble finding it, but I eventually did, and it's phenomenal. It's hilarious.
Yeah, it's real
I've
good.
watched 4 episodes.
The one thing I mean they've figured it out, but there's Jimmy Carr and Rosen Conity are sort of co-hosts. Jimmy's really the host, and they bring Roisin only because I think that they've seen on other versions. At the very beginning, when you have a bunch of comedians and nobody's laughing at the jokes, it's extremely I don't like it, actually. I really find it very uncomfortable as somebody people make some of the funniest jokes you've ever heard and nobody's laughing. And you then are like, should I be laughing? No, I should be laughing. It is funny. They're trying not to laugh. And so they've added Roisin so that Roisin and Jimmy can banter. Like in the Canadian one, it's Jay Baruchel's the host. And at the beginning, it's just Jay Baruchel watching like 10 comedians not laughing and saying
Just
things
silently watching them, also
silently.
not
Like
laughing.
he is a host, so he is being like, "Oh, that's funny," but it's very awkward. And so the more that people get eliminated, and the more that the back room of like the green,
Mhm.
like the behind the scenes room where they have cameras, everything fills up. I feel like the better it is because people actually laugh at all the jokes. But just this cast is stacked. If you've watched anything British panel show related, you've seen at least half of these people. They're tremendous.
There's a moment with a chair and Bob Mortimer that wasn't even intentional and completely broke me.
It's very
Um,
good. It's very good. Yeah.
and I also want to briefly, I don't want to go too deep because we've got plenty to talk about, but I did watch the Iron Claw
Oh,
this week,
wow. A wrestling movie, Taran. Yeah.
2023. Yeah. Well, I also watched massive recommendation for sorry, what's his name? The YouTuber oh geez. He makes videos about like wrestling, and it's something Wolf.
Oh,
But
okay. I don't know. I don't even know.
Unreality of Wrestling, and he is Super Eye Patch Wolf, phenomenal creator. He sort of like uh, uploaded recently his the Unreality of Pro Wrestling video with the updated story,
Cody Rhodes.
talking about Roman Reigns and Cody Rhodes and stuff like that. So I feel like I know much more about wrestling than I did before. But I also watched this movie, and my takeaway is some great acting, and it's just super depressing. Just super depressing.
Did you know that the real life story is more sad than this movie
That's what I
remains?
heard. Yep.
Yeah, they removed the whole child from this
Yep.
horrific series of events because it's more depressing. The only thing like I watched this twice and they were right around when it came out. I would like to rewatch it, but it is very sad. But the one thing I will say is that there is sometimes the way in which I just wish they would resist the urge to have moments where wrestling is supposed to be real in the thing. So there's this moment where Jeremy Allen White's character is like maybe supposed to win the title. You don't really know. And they kind of make it seem like,
Mm.
oh, he didn't win the match, but that's not really how it works. Like and it's more interesting, I think, with the idea that like he actually wasn't picked to be the guy who would get to win. And that to me is far more interesting and actually fits with the themes of the story. But it's a really well acted. It's really, I think Zac Efron, it's one of his best performances. Harris Dickinson, Jeremy Allen White. Can't remember the name of the dad, but he's in like Mindhunter and
Yeah.
he's extremely good. That would be Holt McElhaney. Yeah, it's very good. I like it a lot.
Really great ending. And yeah, honestly, I would say it's not really about wrestling, to be honest.
No,
It's like,
it's about
yeah,
brothers and
yeah.
family, their relationship with their dad, expectations. Yeah, it's good.
All right.
It's
Anything
really
else to catch up on, Grace?
Um, Dimension 20, which is the tabletop role
Mm.
playing show on Dropout, released a new season called Titan Takedown. Speaking of wrestling, where it is 4 professional wrestlers playing Dungeons and Dragons. They play in an ancient Greece thing where the big bad villain is Zeus, who's like basically like the Hulk Hogan macho man of it all looming over them. But it's 4 professional wrestlers: Kofi Kingston, Xavier Woods, Bailey, and Chelsea Green playing D&D. It's 4 episodes. They just came off their seasons of Dungeons and Drag Queens. If that's more up your alley, you can watch that, where it's 4 drag queens from RuPaul's Drag Race and other things playing D&D. I just love Dropout. Dropout also just announced that they're raising their prices for the first time in 3 years, except if you're an existing customer or a new customer who signs up before May. I would encourage you to go sign up. It's like, for my money, most bang for my buck. They have a new season of Game Changer coming out, I believe today, as we're recording this. I interviewed both Brennan Lee Mulligan and Sam Reich recently. So Sam Reich is the CEO of the company, host of Game Changer, and Brennan Lee Mulligan, you can find those on parade.com. They should come out this week. But draw some Dropout content, Taran. They're kind of blowing up. They're selling at Madison Square Garden, playing D&D with WWE wrestlers, having a bit of a glow up.
Boy.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about what's upcoming then. Biggest one, of course, The Last of Us season 2 will be starting. The White Lotus finished this past Sunday, and in its place, The Last of Us season 2 will be starting next Sunday. The reviews have started to come out, and so far it's been pretty positive, I would say.
Yeah.
I will say again, if you haven't heard us talk too much about season 2, I would expect Okay, what I will say is that the reaction to Game 2 was very controversial
Yeah.
for many different reasons.
Yeah.
And so I would expect there to be some controversy for season 2. However, I will say that I think most of what I've seen so far has been very positive. But I think these reviews were released very recently. So also, quite frankly, I just don't really care too much about what the reviewers are saying,
Well,
unless they were all in agreement that it was bad or something.
the other thing about reviewers is I mean, the rumor is that HBO has been extremely withholding of screeners, and so a lot of people I think only got the first episode. So even then, you could say like, oh, people think the first episode's good, but that doesn't mean the whole thing is good. And that is probably not an indication of how they feel about the show. It's probably an indication of how successful the show was in season 1 more than anything. They're holding tight to those screeners, but I'm extremely excited for this. We'll be doing full coverage. Mike and I will be putting a podcast out right after the episode airs on HBO, and then you and I, Taran, coming pretty soon after that with a podcast where we look at it both having played the video games, so a little more spoilery, although we won't fully spoil everything that's happening until the later half of the episode. But I'm just extremely excited for this thing to be. It's
Yes.
well acted, well written, and the story is just wonderful. So
I mean, in a packed year of shows, it is, I think, a contender to me. This could be the best show of the year.
Yep.
Just based on the strength of its first season, which I think was my favorite show that year. So like the Pitt has some competition here. We'll have to see. The Pitt also ending this week, so like it's really just going one into the other. But yeah, check out our coverage. I would say the one with the two of us is not just like oh, it's the video game, but also I would say probably a bit more detail in terms of we have a little more time to dive in and it really examine some things and compare and contrast and all of that stuff. And we will have the spoiler free section as well for the first part of it, so make sure you check that out.
Yes.
Excited for Last of Us season 2. But Grace, it's not the only thing, not the only big thing starting this week. Black Mirror season 7 is dropping very, very shortly, actually, in just a few days.
Yes, I'm excited for this one as well. I think it's 6 episodes this season. We talked about this a little while back. Some of the things I'm excited for, with the first one major, that they're doing the first ever direct sequel. The Black Mirror is very well known for its Easter eggs, but this is a full sequel to USS Callister that I believe will be the last episode of the bunch. Although technically you could watch them in any order. But yeah, that, and then last season they did a little bit of a diversion where they went into some horror genre, and I'm excited to see if they do anything like that this season, but remains to be seen, I think.
Yeah, I feel like honestly we've already talked about Black Mirror enough recently because they only recently dropped the release date, but I'm sure we'll have more to say about it next week when we get a chance to watch some of the episodes. Hacks season 4 is starting this week as well. It's just been a solid show. It's won some Emmys now, I believe, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I think
I'm a big fan of Hacks.
Me too. I think you had it, you had it very high up on when we launched the show about a year ago, little less than that. You had it, I think, like very high up in terms of your, if it wasn't in your top 5, it was very close. And that prompted me to be like, all right, I better get on this. And so I have since checked it out and I enjoy it quite a bit. And this season that they're going into is sort of, Deborah's going to have her late night show for the first time. And at the end of last season, there was a little bit of a conflict between her and Ava. And now it's sort of like them doing this new thing while not being sort of on the same foot. And it's one of those things that when I watched, I was so devastated at the end of the season, being like, no, you should get along and be friends, be friends, please. Just be friends. I know you're fictional, but please. And it certainly looks like this season is setting up to be the two of them butting heads once again. So it looks good. There's supposed to be a ton of guest stars as well. It's the rumor out there because it's her hosting a late night show. So
honestly, I've been kind of waiting for the the hammer to drop on Hacks for it to like not be as good, and so I'm wondering if that's gonna happen this season because I'm not actually that fond of the premise. I think the biggest strength of the show is the relationship between the two main characters, and for it to be outwardly contentious, I think is a big risk. But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, actually I think looking at it, I just get screeners and yeah, reviews were under embargo until April 3rd. So I'm actually able to say I don't think this, but my colleague over at Parade is like maybe not as good as the previous season. That's sort of the general consensus happening, is that maybe it's losing a little bit of its steam to a degree.
That's exactly what I feared.
I've only watched a little bit of it, but I don't feel that entirely, but I haven't seen the full thing to know that it never like it's sort of like building and maybe it never builds to what I think it's building to. So yeah. Yeah, they're doing
Right.
this weird thing where they're in the middle of it, they're going to be dropping. So they're dropping 2 episodes, then 1 episode per week. Then they're dropping 7 and 8 on the same day, and then there's some reason why they're doing some sort of they're dropping some episodes together, not just at the beginning, which is very I don't know. There must be something happen. Oh, that's probably like no, I don't even know why. Nope, doesn't make any sense. I don't know.
All
We'll
right.
see. Yeah.
Another show coming this week, Your Friends and Neighbors on Apple TV, starring John Hamm. We might have talked about this. I'm not sure, but this is there's a hedge fund manager that resorts to burglary after losing his job, targeting his wealthy neighbors. And I really don't know much about this, but it's got John Hamm, Amanda Peet, Olivia Munn, and you know, Apple tends to bat pretty well, so I think this could be fun. I mean, it's tagged as a drama here, but it sounds like a fun little premise. So
I've heard really good things about the show from people who have been reviewing it, so I'm quite excited.
oh, this is the writer of Banshee and
Yes.
Warrior.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I've heard really good things, and I think it's sort of I think John Hamm is a little due for like like a successful leading role, you know, turn. So I'm pretty excited for Your Friends and Neighbors. I've heard good things. I'll be checking this out. And
Hmm.
yeah, it honestly is like yeah, it's on Apple TV, so it's a network that lets their creatives kind of do what they want, basically.
Yeah.
So yep,
I mean, the studio is still doing very well over there
yep,
as well. So,
yep.
and by that I mean the show, the
The
studio.
show, the studio.
Uh,
Yep. Mhm. Mhm.
a couple other quick ones to run through. The Handmaid's Tale is, I think, airing its final season, number 6, starting this week. I bounced out of Handmaid's Tale a long time ago. I'm very surprised that it's actually still airing, personally. But here we go.
Big same. Haven't watched it in years. Can't believe it's coming. It's still on the air, and it's I think the best comment I saw about this is like The Handmaid's Tale potential has the potential to surpass the thing it was like prophesied, like being like, let's not let this happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doctor Who season 2 of the most recent reboot of Doctor Who is going to start up as well. I dropped out of Doctor Who a while ago as well, unfortunately.
I think I need to revisit Doctor Who because I've always been a little bit of a completionist, and actually Tastemakers is actually helping me not feel like, oh, you have to watch everything all the way through. And so I kept stumbling on like the first reboot, you know, like the one that wherever like more than 10 years ago now, and I kind of stumbled my way through that. I think I just need to start on the David Tennant season and then
I think what I saw recently is that the time since the first reboot and now is bigger than the gap between when the original show ended and the first reboot happened, and that
that's
to me
that's
is
wild.
appalling.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. Yeah.
Um, yeah, did you say 10 years ago? Because I'm pretty sure it was
It's
20.
more. Is it 20? It's definitely
Like
not 10.
2005.
I think I tried to say more than 10 years ago,
No,
which I
it
know.
you're
I
correct
know.
in that it feels like it should have been 10.
Other good thing I've seen online recently is when you say 20 years ago, do you mean 2005 or do you mean the 1980s?
Right. In my mind, 20 years ago should be the 90s, at least.
Yeah. but it's not.
but it's not. It's mid 2000s now. All right, one more is Godfather of Harlem is airing its fourth season. I checked this show out, and I think similar, honestly, to like Mobland. It's like a good show,
It's a
but
really
just
good
kind
rating.
of not for me. Yeah, I mean, people love this show. It's it's,
Okay.
it's good.
MGM Plus, I think, kind of like everyone's like, I think that what they try to go for is like basically what I feel like Apple has been able to do. That's like the sense is that like they want to be very prestige uh TV. So that's interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right, and then a couple of movies as well. I mentioned before, Warfare is coming this week. This is Alex Garland, who recently just finished Civil War, and of course, famous for Ex Machina and Annihilation. And then he also wrote some bangers like Sunshine, one of my favorite movies, 28 Days Later. And he is a co-writer director on this with Ray Mendoza, um, who is I'm not as familiar with, and I guess that's why he doesn't have a large list. But I believe Ray Mendoza, I believe, is bringing the more military knowledge side of things, if I'm remembering correctly. The premise of this is that it's going to be a sort of real time military experience that is based on a true experience of people who, oh yeah, here it is, Iraq War veteran Ray Mendoza. So I think it might have even been his experience. I'm not entirely sure, but it's the idea is that this is like ultra realistic. It says docudrama, real time. I expect long takes, stuff like that. So right up my alley in terms of all of that stuff. The war aspect of it, I could take or leave, but like all the like real time, like realistic stuff, I'm personally interested to see. Though I have seen some trepidation about this, especially right now. The idea of like there being a movie about war that might even remotely glamorize it or glorify it, it would be pretty frowned upon. I don't think that's what they're doing here. I think the intention here would be pretty like this is very ugly, bad stuff. But I definitely get the concern.
I liked Civil War, and I know not everyone did, and I know not everyone jived with the storytelling of it. But I think the thing that movie did so exceptionally well was how uncomfortable it made me feel, and how visceral it was to sit in the movie theater as these journalists are like right by what's happening. And having watched the trailer for this movie, I expect about the same. I think one of the interesting things about this movie is this sort of notion that got thrown around that Alex Garland said he was retiring, which he's basically been like, everyone misunderstood what I was saying, and he wanted to focus on screenwriting instead. But clearly he's directing this movie, so it's not that he. I think I don't think he wanted to direct again so quickly, but he is. So I think that that's interesting as well. I'm very excited for this, and I'll also be going to check it out probably as soon as I can. Might even
Mhm.
go to whatever the first showing on Thursday is.
I mean,
I'm
what I think is interesting is that like I have heard nothing about this movie outside of my own kind of research because I know Alex Garland basically.
Yeah, I've only heard excitement about it. I think I've only heard like, and so that should not be confused with people who have seen it and liked it. I've heard because Garland can be polarized. I mean, Civil War was
Mhm.
polarizing. I
Man
liked
was very
Men. People
polarizing.
didn't like Men. I mean, generally, not just the movie. So yeah.
Okay, a couple of other ones. The Amateur with Rami Malek and Rachel Brosnan. And wow, a lot of people actually.
Yeah, this one I
Look,
think
it's Holt McCallany.
Magna,
um,
yeah. Yeah.
yes, but, wouldn't you know it? It's a spy thriller.
Whoa. In these days, uh
Mm,
this one, I think it looks quite good. It has the potential to not be very good. I think we've seen, like, having seen so many spy thrillers, we know that there can kind of be this like sort of, hum ho way of going through it. I want this to be good. I really like Rami Malek, and Lawrence Fishburne is here as well. Rachel Brosnahan and John Bernthal. This Julian Nicholson too. This I, I want this to be good. I'm gonna go.
this feels very snooty of me, but PG-13
Uh,
turns me off.
yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
For a movie like this, that concerns me.
Yeah.
But all right, and then there's one more. There's a bunch of others, but there's one more I just wanted to quickly mention, which is Drop, which is a whodunit sort of mystery thriller, I imagine horror-esque movie by Christopher Langdon, who is the guy behind Happy Death Day and a few others. And writers are the people who did Truth or Dare and The Invitation, I believe, is the other one. Not this person actually. Maybe I'm making up The Invitation.
Is The Invitation that's the vampire one, isn't it?
I might have made that up. I think I made that up. But Truth or Dare definitely was one of the ones they did.
Okay.
So I don't expect it to be high cinema, but it might be fun.
Oh, I've seen the trailer for this a bunch. This is where she gets messages on
Yeah.
her phone while she's on a date. Yeah, this looks not great, but it could be surprisingly great, I think.
I think you'll have, if you like this kind of movie, you'll have a good time, and I like this kind of movie, so I think I'm gonna have a good time.
Fair enough. Have we talked about the Ballad of Willis? What's it called?
That was another one. Yep. I don't think we've talked about it.
Yeah, so this is a movie that kind of got a bunch of buzz outside of Sundance, Ballad of Wallace Island. It's Tim Key. If you're a Taskmaster fan, he was very early on, one of the first few seasons of Taskmaster. He is one of the characters on here. He basically is like rich and eccentric and brings back like he brings this couple who are not together anymore or used to be together as musicians. He brings them onto his island, Wallace Island, for a private concert, essentially. And it's a sort of like rom-com but more comedy type thing of like that dynamic, that he's like rich enough that he's brought them together and he's kind of like aloof in it. He co-wrote it, I believe. He didn't direct it, but he stars in it. Tim Key. I'm a big fan of Tim Key. If you were watching basically any movie lately, it's like I feel like there's like a 50% chance that Tim Key shows up in it. He's in Mickey 17. He was also in what else? He was in something else really recently. He's been in just a bunch of stuff. I like him a lot. So yeah.
All right. Well, is that everything? Should you talk about White Lotus?
I think that's it. Yeah, we can talk about White Lotus.
Okay. Well, if you're gonna bounce out before we talk about the finale of White Lotus, thank you for joining us. We'll be back next week to talk about. There's a lot to talk about next week. You thought this episode was packed full of information. There's so many new shows coming that we need to talk about next week. So tune in for that. It'll be a big one. And thank you for joining us. But in the meantime, if you're sticking around, we're going to talk about White Lotus. Grace, the death was terrible. Can I just the death? It was multiple. It was many deaths. But I had multiple issues with the like action violence scene at the end. One, why is Walton Goggins even at the hotel, just chilling? Why isn't he like at least? I he was first boat. We're on the first boat out. Okay, you're on the first boat out. Why are you at breakfast?
Everyone had to go to breakfast. Everyone was at different times at breakfast. Yeah, I do. So I just felt like all of this stuff was sort of predicted, and I actually think that a lot of it makes sense. I do think like Rick goes and confronts Jim Hollinger. Everyone predicted that's going to be his dad. There was another wild rumor out there.
That was the twist. Oh, he's your like I thought we knew that already. Like no. I genuinely was like, didn't he know that? I was confused about why he was didn't you, when he said your father is like a douchebag or whatever, I was like, yeah, he's saying that about himself. Don't you? Like I thought that was known, but apparently it wasn't.
It wasn't. And then we get the reveal when like she tells like, hey, like we told you. Like I think that there is, I think if you look at the sort of history of I feel like this death is more in line with season 1 than season 2. Actually, I feel like it kind of combines season 1 and season 2, which is season 1, you do sort of have Armand, who is he's so annoyed with Shane that he ultimately like ends up in his room and then he gets stabbed, and sort of like this like thing that like he's propelling himself into a bad situation. And they do this with Rick, and I don't know. I just have a hard time with this idea that, like, it's again, the show is not supposed to be this like, oh, these are good people, but Rick coming to some sort of like understanding of what happened, it doesn't really make sense to me. Like, and then he gets this like, then he's like, oh, actually, I am gonna go kill him. Like, why don't you just kill him the night that you saw him? Like, that's the part for me that
It,
and it would have been better if he knew it was his father. So then he like that's why he chooses to kill him, but they don't do that either. It's all just, I think, thematically, it feels like it built up to something that didn't really pay off well enough.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of little nitpicks, but I think they all kind of like stem from the biggest issue I had, which is that that like this just didn't seem. It felt like um they had this ending in mind and then just like rearranged pieces in order for it to happen. And so like one of those pieces was that like they really wanted the poeticness of like, oh, we're going to spend the rest of our lives together, and now he's super happy and content, only to flip a switch and he's now like murderous again. And then they even do like this scene where he's like talking to the lady, can we talk? And she's like, no, because they needed that amount because but like even that is like now we're waiting even more time for this to happen. And then we have like the fake out deaths of like the kid, the son, it's
Blocky.
just like and then the worst part to me, the thing that completely, because all of this I'm like mostly willing to be like, this is whatever. The thing that broke me when I was watching this episode is when, and forgive me because I don't know the names of the people
I'll
very
help you
well,
out.
but
I'll help you out.
the guard
Get
who
guy
doesn't
talk.
want to harm anyone
Yep.
shows up, sees the lady. She's like, he went that way. Sees a man. He did not. He was not there to witness what happened. Sees a man walking, holding clearly a wounded woman, back turned to him, and just decides to unload into this man. Like, I literally, I said, really? I said it out loud as I was watching this episode. That broke me. I was like, this is absurd to me.
Yeah, the only thing I don't mind the guy talk ending in the sense that there's been this thing of like Mook all season being like, basically, no, you gotta do what they tell you're gonna get promoted. A man of ambition. And so I actually don't mind. Maybe it's set up a little poorly, but I don't mind the
I
ending.
don't mind.
Like,
Yeah, again, like thematically, it all tracks. It's just like the way that they got there did not feel
yeah,
organic at all. That was
yep,
my issue.
yep, that's totally fair. And I just think it's a thing of pacing again, of being in 8 episodes, because I do think that the Mook Guy Talk stuff is so slow and drawn out that like it's so I like all the content that's there. I just think it would have been better served to be over a shorter period of time. And then I think the reverse is true of the Rick Jim Chelsea stuff of like I actually think like front loaded it's actually pretty strong, and then it never really, it has to end somewhere, and they need the death, so they do it that way. And I think it was like I think it was a really ineffective and because like the guy talk stuff, the fact that he becomes the bodyguard and that to me that's so like it's interesting that it's him because there's such this idea of like Western philosophy or whatever, and he's basically this like the idea that he's essentially striving to be something that he's not is such a, I think, the Western idea of things. And it's like of his, where he starts to where he ends, and that he does this all basically in service of like impressing Mook, I think is more like it's more fulfilling than this reverse thing where we watch Rick really struggling at the beginning, closing off Chelsea, thinks he gets some sort of closure that doesn't really make sense to closure as me, and then throw that away and they both die. Like I think Chelsea dying is interesting in the sense that she's so close to, like this is a guy that she thinks she can save and she can't ultimately, but I don't think the Rick stuff was the most compelling finish to what they were like. I'm still a little stuck on what they were trying to tell, and I'm sure someone might come in the comments and be like, oh, it's this, and I'm like, oh, okay, that doesn't change that when I was watching it I was like, okay,
No, I mean,
fine.
and
Yeah,
I think you nailed it for the most part. I think like again, like and you have that shot of them in the water,
right.
and all, like I think that all makes sense, and like the individual pieces all worked, and it's a very pretty shot. It's just like the way to get there to me
Yeah,
just was so unorganic, and that's what, like, despite the absurdity of season two's ending,
yeah,
it actually did feel organic. It felt like a natural extension of the events that played out.
Right.
Whereas this just felt like, well, we need Chelsea to show up at this time. We need him to wait for this amount of time, and she's going to show up at just the wrong time so that she can get shot. And then he's going to be walking over the bridge, and then he'll be shot by the other guy who's going to be impressing his girl, and they're going to be in the water, so we get this cool shot. And it just did not work for me, that stuff.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I really didn't like was the family storyline, because I felt like we spent 8 episodes with this guy whose business he's failed. He's going to go to jail. We spent like 4 episodes with him like fantasizing about killing his family and himself. He then almost does it. His son gets sick because of that. And then Grace, I've heard this talked about, and I'm with them. We don't even see their reactions to finding out about the thing. The whole entire season, we've been waiting this over and over, the same scenes of this guy on drugs. What is going to happen when they find out? And we don't even see it. And I'm sure they're trying to say something, but let me tell you, I don't care what they're trying to say to me about that, because I just spent so much time with this dude, and I feel like almost all of it was wasted. The daughter storyline about realizing that she actually needs material things, that was funny. I like that. I like that a lot. That was very good.
I like it too.
But the dad storyline, are you kidding me?
I think you needed to do one of two things, and they didn't do either of them. So you need him to make a mistake and then realize like, hey, you're actually fine, bro. Like, hey, so one of the things I heard, I believe this is I heard it from Crying Laughing, I believe I heard it from the Rigger podcast, which is apparently the poison fruit is a lawyer terminology for if evidence is obtained illegally, it then cannot therefore be used. And this idea that like if they didn't get a warrant to get Tim's stuff, the idea that he would have made a decision, done something to any of them that then would have led and then immediately been like, oh, bro, you're fine. You're not going to lose all your money. And he's done something. I would have liked that. Or the inverse. I do need their reaction to be like him. I would have liked maybe him stepping more into this, like, hey, look, I'm being such a good dude. I'm owning up to this all stuff. And they're like, what the hell, dad? Like, you effed us. Like a rebellion of his transformation in Thailand. I think either one of those works for me as a storyline. But what you need, Taran, you're exactly right, is you need them to react to what happened. You need something more. And I felt like I definitely thought that this is where we were getting the death, mostly because every single episode ended on Tim Ratliff. Every single episode ends in him in bed or him not finding the gun or like something. He's always the last person we saw in, I think, every episode. And the fact that it sort of like ends up underwhelming in this way with the fake out Lachlan death, I think didn't work for me either. So I would agree with you that this one didn't work.
It just didn't feel coherent, and I tried to not let like stories about production influence me too much, but like this story is released that they filmed like 6 different endings,
right
in order to hide the real one.
Right.
But it felt that way. It felt like this was not all leading to one thing, but leading to a bunch of different things, and they just chose one of them.
Yeah.
And that didn't serve, I think, so many of the other ones. And I think that because of that, the stories that were most isolated from the ending, the death ending, were the best ones. Like the daughter storyline, it doesn't need anything else to do with any of the other stuff. Only tangentially relates to the dad storyline in the sense that he chooses to kill her because of it. And is just a really fun, because like I thought that was really well done. Like the whole time you're like, she's the one. She's the one that's not like the other ones. But then it turns out, no, she really is like that. She's guilty about it.
And I would have liked something maybe with this idea of like Lachlan. I like this idea of like Lachlan in the middle of the family and being pulled, and him trying to figure out who he is and what, and all that. There's so many good ideas here that I feel like don't really end up getting super explored. Like the notion of I did like the notion at the end where Tim realizes that Lachlan is kind of the only one who might be able to get through all this, but I want more of an examination of that. I want more.
I thought that was I thought that was funny, but it wasn't like a real character moment. You know, like
Yeah, that's what I mean. I want more of it. I want
yeah,
more of a like what specifically like I want a better moment between the two of them where Tim realizes because he's so moldable, he has the opportunity not to be molded by them. You know, he has the opportunity not to become basically what the rest of them are as Radliffs. That he actually is somebody who could do something different. But I don't think that I think him being like, yeah, I could do with that money, and he's like, yeah, okay, then I won't kill you with the coconut drink. It's like, okay, man, all right, yeah,
yeah. Um, I thought the best storyline was the three friends. I thought that really worked for me. I think that that one was paced the best. As we like, they come, we learn who they are, and then like each episode, you see that like, oh, they're gossiping about the other one, and they're gossiping about the other one, like, taking turns, and then they go out on the town and they develop this relationship. It turns out they're the robbers, and you know it ultimately like culminates and it teaches Carrie Coon about like how time is meaningful, and it's a cool speech. I thought that all worked really well. I thought it was really good. I thought that like just excise that one thing from the entire rest of the season, and it like it stands on its own and it doesn't like interfere with anything else. It's not interfered by anything else. The worst part of this entire storyline is the ending shot when they all appear to have no reaction to the fact that there was a mass shooting at the hotel they were just staying
it
in.
does seem like they're consoling Jacqueline. Was I misreading that? What I would have liked from the ending, I think one more beat of like, um, a little bit of the let's be okay with the fact that we all kind of know. Like, I want one more little like I could one more little like let's all acknowledge that there's a little bit of like a phoniness to it. Like we are more satisfied with being sort of um uh the friends that we think we are rather than the friends that we actually are. I think I could have used like one more little like I like the idea that it's like, oh, we did grow and learn, and then this almost like that like you all really like the idea of what this means for you all to be considered like a trio of friends, and like the fact that like you have this, but because I actually feel like it's a little bit antithetical to some of what we've seen before in terms of like people learning and growing. I feel like but for the most part I would agree that's probably the best. I actually really like the Mook Guy Talk ending, but I think that overall this is a better story from beginning to end.
I do. I think that like the guard and his theoretically eventually girlfriend who is so clearly like pushing him in the direction of being more ambitious and stuff. I thought that worked really well, especially because it was set up so long to be like, oh, they're such a cute like little
Right.
couple,
Right.
only to see like the darker undertones. I thought worked really well. But the conclusion of it again, just the logistics of it, just really
Yeah. Yeah.
soured me on it. And then also because like, okay, now he's made the decision to be more ambitious, but also decided to let the robbers off the hook. Like now that he's like shades on bodyguard, is he a changed person and decided to rat them out after all, or did he decide like that just didn't quite track to me.
Yeah.
Um,
That's a
because if
good.
we're doing a transition of his character, why hasn't he then also ratted them out? Like I felt like we should have gotten them in handcuffs or something. But
That is a
anyway,
good point. That is a good point.
um, the other one I liked was Belinda was
Yeah,
I
Belinda.
believe.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a fun little storyline. That felt very White Lotus to me in that it was felt ridiculous, but also like reasonable in the world of this show. And
Yeah.
then for her to give the same speech that she was given by Jennifer Coolidge in season one to like the guy who was really sweet, I thought was a fun little touch, and it says a lot in a lot of different ways. And I thought that was well done.
I agree. I thought that was really good. This that she takes the money and goes. I think like there's this world where I think people have been talking about like because I keep saying this thing of like there's no good people on the White Lotus, and every once in a while I hear people like, oh, but like Belinda, or like, oh, but this person, and you know, I guess Chelsea could be argued to be, but Belinda certainly I feel like had the best case of that, and then it's so good at the end she's like, nah, I'm just gonna take the money and see you later, born chai. It's great. I love
Yeah,
it.
and it's not
Yeah.
like I don't think that makes her. I don't know. Maybe there's an argument to me that makes her a bad person, but
I
um,
I know it's I know I agree with you. I think that
but
there's
yes, I
yeah,
think what you said still stands as a point that like she is
right.
not like as innocent as she seems when she said she had moral qualms about it, but then when the number got higher, she was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, actually, I'll take it and I'll bounce out of here.
The porn shy thing is maybe not where she's a bad person. Taking $5 million to not report a man who committed murder to kill his
Yeah.
ex-wife, maybe makes you a bad person. Maybe.
Yeah. All right. That's what I had to get off my chest about White Lotus.
I like your. I mean, it's been very interesting. I feel like we had such a good run of TV, and it's been very interesting. I think like sort of the two big finales that have happened so far this year in Severance and White Lotus, that you've been a little down on. I would say I was not as down on Severance as I am on the White Lotus. That's the Pitt as its finale. Yellow Jackets has its finale this week as well. So yeah, we're sort of gearing into like I think a different season as we like end sort of those shows, and now we're gonna have The Last of Us and Hacks and some other stuff that's on the horizon. Andor is coming back in a bit, so I feel like we're in a little bit of a different season of television, Taran.
Man, I really hope that we don't record this weekend about the Pit, and I'm talking about how much I was.
I hope not.
Finale.
I hope not. That would be terrible. Let's hope not. Yeah, we'll see. We'll have to see.
All right. Well, a bit of a long one here today talking about the White Lotus, but hopefully you enjoyed it. We'll be back next week with plenty to talk about. As Grace mentioned, we've got, in addition to the usual Tastemaker coverage, we've got the Wheel of Time this week. We've got the Pit coverage. We've got The Last of Us coming soon. So stay tuned for all of that. Anything else to plug?
No, just as I mentioned, I have some stuff going up on Parade this week about the stuff I talked about with Dropout, but also on The Last of Us and Hacks. I should have some content up. So parade.com for all that. A new website over on Parade to come if you haven't checked it out. So yeah, looking forward to that. I interviewed Tom Hardy for MobLand recently as well. So lots over there.
Okay, well, thank you all for joining us here today, and we will see all of you next time.